everyone, my name is Gabby and today I am back to bring you my last two reviews of Season 7 of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. In this video, we are going to be discussing episode 12 entitled The End is at Hand. So it's been almost 2 weeks since the finale has aired and it's taken me a while to go back and watch the episodes and then have time to record my reviews. So I apologize that these are coming a little bit late, but I am still incredibly excited to dive in and start discussing these episodes with you. So if you haven't watched the episode yet for some insane reason, please go and watch it. There's a link down below where you can check it out. You can also use Hulu if you're in the United States. But for those of you who have seen the episode, spoilers are happening. Let's just dive right on in to discussing this amazing episode. Right off the bat, I want to shout out Mark Kolpak and Fuse FX, which are the team slash person responsible for bringing all of the VFX to life for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And let me tell you, I know I spent some time in my review for last week's episode talking about VFX, but the sort of new little piece that I want to add is how much it must take to be able to put such excellent and high quality VFX into these episodes that is done on a relatively limited budget. I found it so fascinating when Mark Kolpak talked about VFX in Elizabeth's Live, which I always have linked down below in the description if you want to go and check it out, and hearing him and Jed talk about how they had a really limited budget for VFX, but they still managed to put together some of the most amazing VFX I have ever seen in any movie or TV show ever. It just looks so good and so pristine, and there's so many moments that absolutely just strike a different chord with me because the VFX is so good, and that is all Mark Kolpak and his wonderful team over at Fuse FX. So thank you for everything that you have done throughout these 7 seasons to bring this show to life in new and imaginative ways. The VFX is amazing and it continually astounds me in every single episode. So I also have talked about the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. comedy style in some of my past reviews, and the one little thing I want to add to that is that the comedy style for each of the characters is different but consistently works. Like May's style of humor is a little bit more of this like annoyance, maybe it's a little bit more deadpan. Mac relies a lot on sarcasm. Deke's humor is very in your face. Susa's humor is sort of like this awkwardness of being a man at a time and being a square. Every single comedy style completely different from each other, but all work so well and blend into the episode so nicely, and I just love that. Particularly this moment that starts off the episode of Daisy, Mac, and Susa waiting to be invaded. They're standing on the edge of the Quinjet and have docked on Zephyr 1, and they're just waiting for somebody on the other side to like come in and take them prisoner, and Susa makes a comment about like, are they doing this on the other side? And I think it's similar to that joke that they made in season 4 when Coulson, Fitz, and Ghost Rider were stuck in that alternate dimension, and Coulson makes a comment about how ridiculous they look on comms. I love that type of comedy, and when it's held for just like a beat too long to the point where it's funny is brilliant, and the delivery there was just fantastic. So another thing that I want to talk about for this finale is Bear Mccreery's score, because oh my god, I've been going back and rewatching episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and I've been particularly paying attention to the score, and Bear's score is unreal. It's so beautiful and haunting, and he gets to do so many fun things with the score, particularly in season 4 with Ghost Rider. I did not realize how much I had forgotten about the score and how much it adds to these episodes, and particularly in this finale, we get some really epic moments with the score. So shout out to Bear Mccreery and his team of musicians that do such a good job of adding such intense in these episodes and really making you feel it with the music. Oh, it's so good. And I think the first moment where I really noticed it was when Daisy, Mac, and Susa were walking into Zephyr 1 and there's nobody there and they're seeing it be completely abandoned. The score there is kind of eerie, and I picked up on it and noticed it, and then it only gets better from that point on. So you know I love me some fun camera angles, and we get a decent amount of those in this episode. We get this gorgeous camera tilt when starting the scene in the Chronicom ship with Malik and Cora leading Gemma and Deke into their prison cell in the Chronicom ship. It just looks so good. And I love how all of the camera angles, if you're doing odd things with them or things that are unnatural and you're playing with camera angles, that it looks so sleek and smooth. And that is all Kyle Jewell, director of photography. He is just unreal with what he can do with cameras, and it continually looks good with every single little exploration of the camera angles and every little creative step he takes. It just looks so good, and it's always so fun when you notice unnatural camera angles because they stand out to you and they add so much to the storytelling of these episodes. So Sass Master Deke Shaw is in the house, y'all. Malik threatens Deke and Gemma and tells them that they have one last opportunity to give up Fitz's location or else he'll hand them over to be dealt with by the Chronicoms. And he doesn't get to finish his sentence, but he says something along the lines of like, and they're not as, and Deke cuts him off and says, amateurish, pedestrian, ham-fisted. In the way that he just throws shade at Malik for being this weak and immature villain who has no idea what he's getting himself into is just so brilliant. And I love how protective Deke is of Gemma, particularly when Gemma gets injected with that serum that melts her implant, and Deke immediately like goes to protect her. It's so precious. I just love him and his character development for this 7th season. This is like no longer about him and his own self-interest. It's absolutely about protecting Gemma and protecting Fitz. And that's some amazing character development in comparison with season 5, where he was solely concerned with protecting Gemma and Fitz for his own well-being and survival. And maybe there's still a tiny little ounce of that in there, but definitely nowhere near as much as there was in season 5. So I brought this up in my like freak out finale reaction, which if you want to check that out, you can click the link in the card. But Sybil is now budget Ada. So I've been rewatching season 4 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Ada is a lot more interesting villain than Sybil is, but I feel like it's just the way that Sybil is written, and Tamara, who plays Sybil, is absolutely fantastic. But seeing Sybil with a human body, I was like, no! I was like, we did this shit already with the murder robots. Don't need this again. But she is a lot more concerned with numbers and data and facts and what is the likelihood that X, Y, or Z is going to happen, whereas Ada is a lot more concerned with the human emotions and wanting to feel human emotions and seeing the human version of herself and not being able to understand those human emotions that everyone around her is experiencing. And I think that makes her slightly more complex and interesting than a robot that just predicts the future and just solely wants Earth to be able to allow her people to survive. It's not a very like complex want or desire, but again, that's just the way that her villain was written. It's sort of in the same way that Malik is written to just want chaos and anarchy and world domination for the sake of it. And it was really interesting. I went back and was watching season 3, and there's that flashback episode where you find out that Hive took over Nathaniel's body. And getting those flashbacks of Gideon Malik and Nathaniel Malik and seeing everything that happened there and what his alternate version of history could have been, it felt really consistent with his character and all of his wants and desires, which I thought was so interesting. And Thomas Sullivan, I think, does a really good job of playing Nathaniel, and he seems like the absolute antithesis to Nathaniel as a character. He seems really sweet and lovely. I think that his acting this season is impeccable because it's so clear that Nathaniel is in over his head and solely is concerned with his own well-being and is willing to turn against any of his own people if it benefits his own desire. Like, he does not care about anybody else on his team. He solely cares about himself and having power, and if somebody gets in the way of that, then off with their head. I think we've had better villains in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but I think that the villains that we did get, what makes them complex, what makes them interesting, is that they have tools at their disposal that make them more dangerous. So I don't know how I feel about this next thing, and I'm still sort of confused even after seeing how this whole little plot line wrapped up. But apparently May is able to feel the weight of all of the S.H.I.E.L.D. deaths after she and Coulson and Yo-Yo watch all of the S.H.I.E.L.D. bases go down. I'm assuming her empathic ability is growing in power, so before she just needed to touch somebody, then she needed to be in the room with them, and now she's able to experience it from like miles and thousands of miles of radius. I don't understand fully how that works, and I feel like we could have gotten a few lines in episode 8 that could have given us a little bit of an idea as to how her power works or what it is that's happening there, because we just have to assume assume that she got it from wherever she was in season 6, but we never get a concrete answer as to whether that's true or not. We kind of just have to assume that that's the case. And then how that works, if she ever is able to get rid of that power, if she's always going to have it now, and how far it extends, if she's just always feeling what other people are feeling inside of feeling her own emotions as well. I don't fully understand. So that moment where she was like feeling all the shield deaths and she like leaned over, this is interesting. Like, I think May is the perfect character to be the empath, but when we start to like expand her power a little bit and we don't get concrete explanation as to how it really works, I'm left sort of speculative. And that's just me as a reviewer. So another thing that I'm sort of unsatisfied with is this Nathaniel Cora kiss, because it immediately goes south from there. Cora immediately starts to question why Nathaniel is working with the Chronicoms and didn't tell her, and why Nathaniel killed her mother, and we're starting to see that she is starting to question him, which then I don't know what that kiss was about. If she just does it because she wants so desperately to believe that Nathaniel has her best interest at heart, or if she wants to convince him that she's still on his side even though she's maybe planning on turning on him. I don't really know. It's sort of unclear, and again, that kiss was a very last minute thing, so I have a feeling that it probably shouldn't have been there and somebody just decided kiss because why not, because we hadn't really had a lot of romantic moments this season. But I'm not really about it, because after Cora immediately starts questioning him and Nathaniel starts feeding her lies about all the horrible things that Jiaying said about Cora that Jiaying never actually said, I was like, yeah, like this is like not gonna work, the romance between them. And Cora is clearly starting to question him, and good for her for calling him out and like waking up. Okay, let's talk about my favorite scene in the whole episode, which is this moment of Deke doing a full-scale imitation of Fitz. I fully lost my mind when I watched this scene for the first time. I am even more obsessed with it, and I've rewatched it so many countless amounts of times because it's so good. So Deke is trying to get Gemma to remember Fitz, and it's not working. She's remembering and forgetting things. She's spouting random nonsense. So Deke decides to do a full-scale imitation of Fitz, which includes him like turning his back like this is like some game of like verbal charades, and puts his hands on his hips and props up his heel. Absolutely perfect body movements and motions and everything, and then turns around and does this terrible Scottish accent that reminded me of The Princess Bride a little bit. A combination of the priest from The Princess Bride, like Mowage, and Billy Crystal saying "to blave," like true love. It felt like a weird mix between all of that, and I loved that because The Princess Bride is my favorite movie of all time. I just knew that Jeff was purposely doing a horrible Scottish accent because it makes it funnier that Deke is struggling with it. But it's still good, like it's still excellent, because I know that Jeff can do a way better impression of Ian than that. I've seen it and I know. So this moment to me, the reason why I freaked out about it was not even Deke imitating Fitz, it was Jeff getting to imitate Ian. Like that felt like a gift that was given specifically to Jeff, like the last one of this show. Like here's one last final gift. Not only was it a gift to him, it was a gift to all of us, and I so badly want to see footage from the table read of this moment of like Ian being there as Jeff is reading these lines. Oh, I just imagine how good that moment must have been. I will settle for rewatching that portion of the episode over and over and over again until I die, because it was that good. And it's so funny that Gemma immediately thinks that his impression is of James Bond. It's so great. Deke immediately just sighing and rubbing Gemma's back and comforting her. It's just so adorable, and I love the development of the relationship between Deke and Gemma. It's so beautiful, and it just makes my heart so happy. This next moment we have come up twice in the episode, so I want to address it right here, right now. Daisy, Mac, and Susa are coming up with a plan to rescue Gemma and Deke, and Daisy is solely focused on rescuing Gemma, and Mac is the one that brings up Deke and is like, we have to rescue Deke too, and Daisy says sure. And then once Daisy does get Gemma and Deke, she also mentions just rescuing Gemma, and Deke even pipes up and me, and she says sure again. She's so dismissive of Deke, and that really upsets me because it feels out of character because Daisy already established that she understands that Deke is not the same person that he was in the lighthouse, and she could be a little bit more receptive to him. Like the continual punches and the jabs towards his character, I don't appreciate. And I don't know why we have to just stick with it until the very end. Like, it's the freaking series finale. Can we cut his character a break for 2 seconds? Thanks. But we do get one good moment that comes out of the scene, which is another doozy kiss. I personally like Daisy and Susa. I wasn't on board with them at first, but I feel like once their first kiss happened and I saw where the arc was going and I got a full understanding of what the writers were trying to do with their two characters, I embraced it because Susa is such an easy and good character that there doesn't have to be a lot of character development there because he's just a nice guy who likes strong and powerful women. It works. Like, it's just that simple and it works, and I feel like you don't need extensive character development because it's just not necessary, and I really love that about their two characters. Particularly, I think what impresses me even more is that in the span of a half of an episode, the writers have managed to develop this brilliant bromance between Mac and Susa. Susa kisses Daisy, she leaves to go and rescue Gemma and Deke, and then Susa comes back over to where Mac is standing. There's like again another beat of silence, and then Mac just says impressive and Susa says thank you, and it was just great. It was such a good end to that scene, and what makes it even better is that we immediately jump to Coulson, May, and Yo-Yo back in the lighthouse with even more puns and great one-liners. The scene starts out with Coulson saying, "Turns out I speak facts. This isn't facts." Like, I felt like Coulson was dropping rhymes in that moment. It was so funny, and I'm just in love with that line, and Clark's delivery of it, so good. I also find it funny that Coulson calls the bombs that Garrett is attaching to the walls of the lighthouse chronobombs. One, because it's just a funny name, and two, because we actually get to see a chronobomb later on in the episode, and I almost wish that Coulson could have seen this like duct tape monstrosity, because that is a chronobomb. I'm gonna miss Coulson and his puns. Coulson gets a lot of really good lines in this show that I've forgotten about, and I'm gonna miss them. So we're just gonna say this and leave it at this. Nathaniel thinking he and Cora are more powerful than Daisy is just hilarious to me. We all know it's not true. So we get like our last Felinda moment of this show. It's Coulson and May having this conversation about how they're different people than they were before, and Coulson is coming to embrace his LMD self. As I've said before, I don't know how I feel about this because he seemed so resistant to being code and not wanting to have come back in this way, and I guess now that he can read facts and he's able to read code and has found this new ability for himself, I think he's coming to embrace this version of himself that he is. I think that's good. I just feel like it could have been maybe a little bit more obvious. I feel like it just sort of comes in at the end. Also, May has this really weird line like, do the timelines change us or do we change them? It's so corny and philosophical and unlike May, and I think the point of that line, as awkward as it was, is to illustrate the fact that May and Coulson are not the same people that they were before, and so them being together, as much as like both may want it or may not want it, they're both on separate paths and journeys now, and I think in my mind I'm happy with where their characters end up because there is a possibility, but they're allowed to be their own separate people going on their own separate paths, and if they find their way back to each other, then great. I think the writers did a good job there. Unfortunately, I feel like we could have gotten a little bit more to that moment, but then Garrett immediately cockblocks them, which is great. Just all the more reason to hate John Garrett. I love the fact that we throw back to season 2 with Fitz's creation of these square devices that stopped Gordon from traveling, the science biatch moment, the I'm the guy who kills Gordon moment, throwing it back to all of that excellence. Garrett fails at trying to teleport and then begs Malik to not have the bombs go off so everyone in the lighthouse doesn't die, including him, and Malik immediately turns on Garrett and is like, sorry bro, it was nice knowing you, thank you for your service, bye. And then the lighthouse blows and somehow everybody survives. So we get our last scene from the season 7 trailer of Mac taking out the Chronicoms with this device that he like slams into the ground and all the Chronicoms go flying. It was really sad for me watching that scene because I was like, the last scene we've gotten from that big season 7 trailer. That's it. Like, it was really starting to hit me that the show was coming to an end, so that was an emotional moment. We get another gorgeous camera tilt as the Chronicoms walked obliviously past Daisy. We find out that they're doing this because Sybil wants Daisy to get to Simmons because Simmons will be more likely to reveal Fitz's location. It doesn't work because Cora stops them. I love the use of camera angles again, and so when I see them, I gotta point them out. So talking about Deke Shaw's amazing character development, the scene starts out with Simmons resting her head on Deke's shoulder. Both of them are resting. You can clearly tell they're tired, and Deke hears a banging on the door, immediately is alert and awake, and stands up ready to fight, although he's clearly knows he's gonna get his ass kicked, but is gonna try anyway, which is just such amazing character development, and I love that he's willing to go down to protect Gemma, but thankfully it's just Daisy. And again, that sigh of relief as he hugs Daisy and is just so happy to see her. And when Daisy finds out that Simmons doesn't remember her, or anybody on the team for that matter, and Deke has to explain it, and Simmons asks Daisy about her Quake suit and calls it a costume, and Daisy immediately gets defensive and is like, it is not a costume. And Simmons asks if she can have one, and Deke and Daisy just look at each other and say in perfect unison, yes. I just loved that. So many tiny, great comedic moments in this episode that I am fully obsessed with. So as I was talking about Mac and Susa's bromance before, I love that Mac has so many different relationships with each of the characters in this series, and that the connection between the two characters is different. That's, I think, the operative word in that sentence. With Susa, I think he's kind of, I don't want to say annoyed, but he's exasperated by Susa being this perfect square. Susa uses the word peachy, and Mac is immediately just no, and then Susa asks, Susa just genuinely doesn't understand what he's doing wrong, and then Mac blows it off and is like, it's a fine word, you're a fine man, and I think is really coming to embrace Susa and his gentlemanliness and how proper he is. I love it so much. Susa is such a great character, such a good addition to the 7th season. Thank you, Enver. You made the 7th season really, really special. But Susa also is quite a contribution to the team because he sees all of the Chronicom bodies on the floor, recognizes that they're not going to be able to take out as many of them as they would like with the pellets that Deke designed, so he decides to recreate the nuclear bomb that the Chronicoms were trying to make in the 50s with the Helix, and I mean, that's really freaking smart, and it's even better when Deke sees it, and we'll talk about that in a few seconds. But first, we have to talk about Elizabeth and her acting in this episode. Performer of the Week, Elizabeth Henstridge. Yes. So a lot of this episode is Elizabeth's incoherent rambling about so many different things. A large part of it is marriage. It's just so good because I can imagine it being incredibly difficult to be given nonsense and to be able to make it look like something, to be able to understand that there's something going on in this character's head, and to be able to visually convey that with a whole bunch of random words. And she does a phenomenal job. Elizabeth Henstridge is absolutely the standout of this 7th season. She does such good job episode after episode after episode after episode, and that Performer of the Week title from TV Line is absolutely deserved. Cora and Daisy have one last showdown in this season. Daisy refuses to fight Cora, but we get some amazing VFX here of Cora's powers and Daisy's powers. Cora starts to recognize that Daisy isn't the bad guy and tells Malik that, and Malik then of course immediately turns on her as he turned on Garrett, because if she's not going to help him and is going to resist him, he just decides to steal her power because, you know, that's what bad guys do when their allies turn on them. But that's what always happens. The bad guys always end up turning on each other. We cut back to Coulson, May, Yo-Yo, and Garrett in the lighthouse. Coulson recognizes the signal for an 084 and realizes that he needs to be able to get out of the lighthouse to be able to find where that signal is. John Garrett volunteers and says, I'm a human teleportation device, I can help you. They're not interested in that idea, and then we get this brilliant, brilliant line from John Garrett, and he says, new timeline, new John Garrett, with this big ass grin, and wow, that was some excellent delivery. That was a good moment. I had to shout that out. It was such brilliant delivery from James Paxton. It just felt like I saw so much of his father in that moment. It was impeccable. So now we get to the section of the episode that I like to call Find Me Some Duct Tape. Mac and Susa assemble these Chronicom bombs, and then duct tape them to missiles. And Deke is really worried about the idea and doesn't really know what's going on. He gets Daisy and then radios over on the comms and says it's go time, and then pauses for a second and says, do I sound cool when I say that? The beat there was perfect and the delivery was perfect, and then we get to see the gorgeous duct taped Chronobomb, the VFX there. So gorgeous. I don't know why I was particularly obsessed with the VFX there, but I was. It looked stunning. I think I'm supposed to feel sympathy in this moment, but I didn't. When Garrett dies immediately after helping the S.H.I.E.L.D. team, he teleports them. There's a whole bunch of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents that are in Swayze's, and Victoria Hand immediately shoots Garrett, which feels like really full circle. There's really some beautiful irony in that I just love. He doesn't even last 2 seconds. You don't really even get to see him be redeemed. But I wrote in my notes, rest in pieces, bitch, because he beat up Deke Shaw, and nobody earns my forgiveness after that. Sorry. So, as I mentioned before, we get to see a young Victoria Hand in Swayze's with all of these other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, and I love the fact that she's on screen for a few moments, but we don't even say her name. Like, you don't get any acknowledgement of who she is, but yet every single person that is in the audience that is watching this episode knows exactly who she is, and that's when you know you have something special as a television show. I thought that was such a great and unexpected cameo, and it made my heart really happy to see her. As I mentioned before, we get the throwback to the 084, the beginning of this show. What a full circle moment. All the different S.H.I.E.L.D. agents have these different 084s, and Coulson and May are looking at them, trying to figure out how to assemble them, and then the team reunites. Simmons immediately goes over to all of the 084s and starts to put them together, and we also get some like nice reunion moments. Mac and Yo-Yo hug, Coulson and Daisy hug, and May and Daisy hug, and that hug was particularly beautiful, and I loved the little beat that was spent on that, recognizing that May is fully in tune with her emotions now. That was really, really well done. And then as this 084 is being assembled, I'm fully having a meltdown because I'm recognizing that this device is going to be the thing to summon Fitz, and when Enoch has someone who sends the final piece, and we start to realize that as he was left behind in the decades, he was leaving behind all of these pieces for all the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents to come together and assemble at this point in time. Then the wedding ring being the final piece to this 084, to this whole device and contraption, absolutely sent me into a tailspin. Elizabeth is having this whole rambling, or Gemma is having this whole incoherent ramble about like 2 becomes 1 and 3 becomes 1, something like along those lines, and marriage, and then she says, I was married, I am married, I have proof, and pulls off the wedding ring and then uses that as the final piece in the 084, and then the 084 summons Fitz, as I like realized and actually getting to see it, and then he's wearing Deke's helmet. So I fully want to believe that Fitz had made this helmet earlier in that timeline where Deke exists, and that Deke got that helmet from his grandpa, because it looks so much like Deke's helmet that can't be a coincidence. So that had me even more traumatized. I was just fully lost it at this point. Ian's defeated damn when he recognizes that Gemma doesn't remember him, and how Gemma goes to Deke for protection when Fitz immediately comes at her and she's like, no, I don't know who you are, and is still overwhelmed. I mean, what an iconic end to that episode. I've missed Ian DeCastiger and his acting. Wow, I don't think I realized how much I miss Fitz. So we get to our final tag scene ever for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and I'm not too much of a fan of this tag, but I want to point out the last line of the tag because it feels very self-aware and almost as if there's a fourth wall break happening there. But Sybil says there's a 100% chance this is the last time the S.H.I.E.L.D. team will ever be together. The end is at hand. And she's not exactly looking dead center into the camera. She's sort of looking out into the distance. But it feels very, very self-aware because all of the audience members know that this is the last episode of the 7th season, that we're getting to it, and that the title of the episode is called The End is at Hand, and that's the final line of the tag. Like, all of that is so beautiful and so incredibly symbolic. We've been building up to this, the idea of this being the last mission, the final time the team will ever be together. I mean, that tag was really just, it felt like a little bit of a call out, but it was good, and it was, I think, a really good way to wrap up the final tag scene of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. ever and send us into the final episode. Okay, so that is about it for my thoughts on episode 12. I am now going to go film my review for episode 13, and hopefully these will be up back to back or close enough to back so you can immediately hop over to watch my review of episode 13 next. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time in a new one. Lemons to you all. Goodbye!